Social selling leaders create 45% more opportunities than peers with lower SSIs. So, in other words, social selling leaders in their minds are the people who have high SSI scores. So, social selling leaders are 51% more likely to reach quota, and 78% of social sellers outsell peers who don't use social media. Welcome to the Making Sales Social podcast, featuring the top voices in sales, marketing, and business. Join Bryn Tillman, Stan Robinson Jr., and me, Bob Woods, as we each bring you the best tips and strategies our guests are teaching their clients so you can leverage them for your own virtual and social selling. Enjoy the show. Hey now, and welcome to Making Sales Social Live, coming to you from the Social Sales Link virtual studios. I'm Bob Woods. Bryn Tillman is off today, but Stan Robinson Jr. is here. How you doing, Stan?
Doing excellent. How you doing, Bob?
Doing well, doing very well. Thanks. Appreciate it. So, you might have heard that LinkedIn's social selling index, or SSI as it's called, is going away. History, archives, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Well, it's actually still going pretty strong, and it's still free for you to check your score. And if used correctly, your SSI can really help you to up your game on LinkedIn to start more sales conversations without being salesy. So, before we get into the discussion, if you want to check your SSI, it's at linkedin.com/sales/SSIs. So that's really how to it's a really good way to do it. If you're watching us live on LinkedIn right now, it is in the chat already. We're going to put that in show notes for you if you are listening to us delayed on our podcast. So Stan, what do you think about SSI? There are so many widely varied opinions on it, from it's the greatest thing since sliced bread to, let's nuke it from orbit just to be sure. Where do you find yourself on that spectrum?
Yeah, the SSI debate, I guess I come out on the side of it's a nice tool to use to make sure you're doing all of the activities around social selling, or at least most of them, as defined by LinkedIn and Sales Navigator. So it is a tool. In some ways, it can be used for
Mhm.
gamification because people in sales in particular tend to be competitive. And there is a little leaderboard that I'm sure Sales Navigator admins have taken advantage of in terms of getting people to look at where they are on the leaderboard and try to do more.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think that that's one area where Sales Navigator for team use really comes into play, and it comes into play well because back when Brennan and I worked for another company, and we've told this story before, but there was one company that actually had prizes for the highest SSI scores for each month,
Oh
and
my.
that really helped with LinkedIn, Sales Navigator, and just social selling roll out and reinforcement within the company as well. And the ones who were really good not only won the prizes, but they also won more business because they were using it effectively, which is, I'm going to use that as a bridge because LinkedIn
Mhm.
has put out some numbers here that I'm looking at on my other screen. Social selling leaders get better results. So they have three stats out. And all of this is with the idea that the higher the SSI score, the more effectively that you're using it. So social selling leaders create 45% more opportunities than peers with lower SSIs. So in other words, social selling leaders in their minds are the people who have high SSI scores. So social selling leaders are 51% more likely to reach quota, and 78% of social sellers outsell peers who don't use social media. Now, that third one I can definitely see happening big time. What do you think of those numbers, and how do you think that they correlate with the real world essentially?
Yeah, because the key is how they correlate with the real world.
Yep.
because the whole goal, at least for those responsible for revenue development, is to generate more revenue.
Right.
And, whether your SSI score is higher or lower, if you're generating revenue, that's the goal. But that said, the fact that these 4 categories that we'll be talking about encourage you to do a better job at social selling, helps. I think the third question, which was around social media, was a little bit broader. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because
Yeah.
it applies to those using social selling in general, um,
Right. Yeah.
which is a little bit broader than the categories for the SSI score. But
Yeah.
the one thing I want to stress is what you mentioned, Bob, is sales results are what matter. And we'll talk about, I guess,
Yeah.
what's a good SSI score, because I'm
Right.
sure some people listening are wondering, okay, what's
Yeah,
good?
definitely. Yeah, so, before I get into that, I do wanna mention, one criticism that's out there that I do think is valid to a certain extent. Sometimes the SSI gets criticized for being more of a usage index than a performance index because it assesses just activity as opposed to, activity, which I think should obviously be a part of it, but activity plus effectiveness, plus quality, I think, too. I mean, because you could be putting absolute junk out there. I had to hold myself back because I don't want an explicit rating for this episode, but yeah, I mean, you could be using things well, and yet you're not getting conversions like we were talking about before, as well as, you're just putting crap out there. And
Mhm.
a high SSI score in and of itself does not guarantee success. You still need to do what we're about to talk about with the 4 categories in a much better, value driven everything that we talk about, all of those ways as well.
Yep, yep. And I should have mentioned that Sales Navigator users do get an automatic bump in their SSI score. So,
That's the other thing. So let's talk about scores really quick. So, some say that a score of 70 or higher is great. LinkedIn recommends aiming for a score of 75 or higher to establish yourself as an industry thought leader, as it always puts. The thing about that, though, is what Stan said. It's very difficult if you don't have LinkedIn SSI to get into the 70s. Or I'm sorry, LinkedIn Sales Navigator to get into the 70s and above. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you've got to be like devoted full time essentially to using LinkedIn to get that high of a score. So if you don't have Sales Navigator and you don't have a 70 or a 75 or higher, don't necessarily sweat it. 40 to 69 is kind of a general range of being good. Obviously, if you want to be better, you're going to want to try to get, basically just get as high as you're able to without breaking your back. And I think that that's probably the other big thing. I mean,
yeah,
what we do and what we teach and everything is great, but you still got to sell.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think it's really good for, say, sales leaders who are just trying to assess where their different team members are in relation
Mhm.
to each other and who needs help with what. So if
Right.
your SSI score is 25, there's lots of room for improvement. You can quickly make it move up.
Yep.
And LinkedIn does tell you exactly more or less what to do within
Yeah,
those 4
exactly.
categories, which is very helpful.
Yeah. So that's a perfect time to get into those 4 categories now. So, as you can imagine, they're scored 0 from 25 equaling 100. Establishing a professional brand is that first bucket of 25 points. So this includes and it's pretty big on the completeness of your profile, as well as endorsements that you have, articles that you may be publishing, and followers as well. Um, so when it comes to that, you definitely want to have your profile very, very complete. So one of the things that you're going for there is the all-star rating, which is still out there. I thought that they had dropped it, and it kinda came back. I see it sometimes, at other times I don't, depending on profiles and things like that. Who knows?
Yeah.
B but you definitely wanna have every single section in there filled out, and filled out with quality too, because this is another area where it's, performance versus usage, and you could literally have X's through everything and have an all-star rating, but yet you got crap out there. So you have to make sure that you are putting in really quality stuff for your profile. You might gotta make sure you have endorsements. The 2 areas that I recommend that you really wanna fill out more are the featured section, and then also have recommendations both coming in and going out. Those will also influence your LinkedIn SSI. Stan, what do you think about that? All of that, any of that?
Yeah, it's funny, among the metrics in the 4 categories, I think the profile, at least once you get it up to over 20, is the
Yeah,
one that is least likely to change. It's not gonna
yeah.
fluctuate as much as the other ones we'll talk about.
Right,
So,
yeah.
as you were saying, Bob, the biggest thing is to make sure that your profile is completely filled out. I was wondering about the all-star rating too, because, it was kind of helpful for people to to get a sense of how good their profile actually was.
Right, yeah, the
And
all-star
and
thing is, when it comes to and it still says this on the platform, so I've still gotta believe that it's true. If you get the all-star ranking, for whatever reason, your presence in searches also goes up. LinkedIn probably thinks that this is a truly quality, um, profile when it has all-star on it, so it promotes it more somehow. God knows how. It's the algorithm. It's all alchemy at that point anyhow.
Yep, yep, exactly. Now, one other quick note on something you mentioned, Bob, is that they use as a metric is articles published, which for me
Yeah,
was kind of counterintuitive as far as how it relates to the profile. Now, that said, if you're in sales and you're thinking to yourself, "Oh my gosh, do I have to start publishing articles now?" The answer is no.
right,
Not, but as it relates to your profile completeness, the answer is yes. You need to make sure that your profile looks good.
right,
But,
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
but
exactly.
but articles, if the thought of, writing articles gives you hives or something, don't think that you need to do that in order to get a good SSI score.
Yeah, exactly, and actually a couple things there off of what Stan just said. So profile and articles, I don't think are related, but it all comes under establishing a professional
Professional
brand, and
brand.
I can see how LinkedIn sees articles as establishing a professional brand that's kinda separate from the profile. The other thing about articles, and I'm just gonna mention this really quick, is they may not do well within LinkedIn proper, if LinkedIn was a town or whatever, I'm not sure. LinkedIn articles do actually do very well in Google searches. So that's actually a way to bring people who you may not necessarily be talking to in the virtual sense, talking to with air quotes on LinkedIn. But if they come across an article of yours in a Google search, you bring them in,
Yeah,
and that helps you with your professional brand there because you're bringing people in from LinkedIn. Hopefully, they'll click through to your profile if it's complete, especially the way that we teach you. You have a much higher chance of getting us some kind of conversation started with them at that point.
yep, yep. Great. That's a great point because most folks, don't get a whole lot of engagement on LinkedIn on
Right.
articles. But as you mentioned, what they can do for Google search and your visibility is important. And most people, I'm sure, don't realize that. So that's very
Yep.
helpful.
Yep. So the next one, and this is where our good yet pricey friend Sales Navigator comes in, is finding the right people. So in this category, LinkedIn's looking at how you identify better prospects in their words, in less time using efficient search and research tools. So in other words, it's who you're searching for, and then starting the process from there. So this is one category that's driven more by Sales Navigator, because if you have Sales Nav, you're likely going to be higher because LinkedIn knows that when you do searches on Sales Navigator, that you're doing them much more effectively just because Sales Navigator's tools are just awesome compared to what's available on LinkedIn.com, which are pretty good. Don't get me wrong, but
Mhm.
Sales Navigator is just heads and tails above. Absolutely kicks butt at searching here. So, but even using regular LinkedIn.com searches can help you here too, Stan. So let's talk a little bit more about searching and um, and the SSI, and especially just with Sales Navigator in general, because you are getting benefits from that.
Yes, you definitely do. SalesNav has something like 14 more. It's got many more search filters
Yes.
than LinkedIn, the free version. So you can narrow your searches. You can look for people who are more likely to be active on LinkedIn, which is by using posted within the past 30 days. And there's really no way to do that on free LinkedIn, because one of the best things you can figure out is, okay, if I'm going to take time to find someone, to look for content that they're posting so I can engage with it, out of the, I don't know, what are we up to? Close to a billion. I'll just say close
Yeah,
to a billion at one
I think it's
point.
over a billion now, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's an
yeah,
incredibly
it
huge
keeps
number.
going. Yeah. So how do I narrow this down? Because your problem with Sales Navigator search is never going to be finding enough people. It's going to be, out of the 10,000 search results that I get, how do I narrow it down to the ones who are most of interest to me, the top
Yep,
100, 200? So the
yep.
search filters, both for leads, which are individuals, and accounts, which are business entities like companies, are more numerous and allow you to be much more targeted.
100%, 100%. So the next one that we're going to move to is engaging with insights. So this is the third bucket within the SSI. So this includes actions like sharing, liking, commenting, resharing, messaging. In this category, LinkedIn really encourages you to go above and beyond just posting content, which obviously, if you listen to us all the time, we talk about this all the time as well. You build networks not only by connecting, but by sharing, liking, commenting, resharing, messaging. All of these actions give you great opportunities to bring in new connections that are also a high quality to you. You're a high quality to them. Win-win. You can really help with, potentially starting a sales conversation or help them out with networking or whatever. LinkedIn wants you to uh build your network in a high quality way, and especially if you're like liking and commenting and resharing and doing that type of thing with content. If you're doing it in a value added way, which we talk about all the time, you're adding value to what someone else has already done. You are going to build your own presence as a thought leader, as the go-to person in your industry, because you are sharing in addition to what's already been shared in terms of value, whatever that value is within that content. So engaging with insights is huge. It's probably the number that is the lowest for many people. I know it's the lowest for me. That's only because lately I've been so busy that I really haven't had the time to engage with insights, and my LinkedIn SSI score is definitely showing that. I don't know about yours,
Yeah.
Stan, and how you're doing. You're actually engaging quite a bit, I've noticed. So I think that you do better than I do.
Yeah, it hasn't made a big difference in the SSI score, which is why we caution people, especially once you
Yes.
get over 70, to don't sweat a 1 or 2 point drop in your SSI score, because I've actually seen salespeople do that. They've got
Oh,
an SSI score of like 74, and they say, "My SSI score dropped by 2 points. What do I need to do?" And I normally just say, "Keep prospecting, please. Don't sweat a two."
yeah.
Because the other thing is LinkedIn occasionally changes their algorithms. Surprise, surprise. And all of our SSI scores can take a hit at the same time. And I don't know about you, Bob, but I can't not think of an instance where they changed their algorithm and everyone's scores went up. It's
Yeah.
always the opposite.
It always goes down. I remember several years ago when a bunch of people, and probably myself included back then, because I didn't look at it then like I look at it now, everybody's, like, went down, and I mean, like, we're talking at least a dozen points, if not more, and we're all like, what the you know what just happened? Did it happen to you? Yeah. Did it happen to you? Yeah. Did it happen to you? Yeah. And I mean, obviously LinkedIn did more of its alchemy in the background that it never talks about. And everyone got knocked down. And of course it didn't say anything because LinkedIn is LinkedIn. And it was just it was I mean, it ended up being fine. Obviously, it's fine. If your score goes down a little bit, just like Stan said, the number one thing that you need to do is not worry about your score, just relax and and just like was it a t-shirt or whatever that just says, "Keep doing what you are doing."
Yep. Or once upon a time, there may have been a Keep on Truckin' t-shirt, but a lot of folks
Yeah. Oh my
that
god,
was yeah,
that's like OOG. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah.
We're showing our age, sir. So, the last one is building relationships. So this includes your connections and the acceptance rate of your connection requests. So this isn't just about treating LinkedIn like a baseball card collecting site, which I heard that comparison years and years and years ago, and it used to be so accurate. It's not nearly as much now, but still people do it. This is about networking effectively. Just keep in mind here that quality is more important than quantity. Focus on identifying and connecting with real people, people who are relevant to your industry, your profession, your clientele, to the network of people with whom you want to connect and share whatever it is that you share when it comes to networking. It's about quality, not quantity.
Yes, absolutely. I don't want us to sound like the digital version of a broken record. I don't know what that is. Bob, I need to update that analogy.
That's
But
just a scratch on a CD, but that's old now too. That's like dropping off in streaming or something like that, having a
yeah,
network connection interrupted while you're streaming a song. That's like the only thing I can come up with.
yeah, some type of continual loop. But we encourage you to include a note when you invite someone to connect, which which normally will result on you in more of your invitations being accepted. And in combination with that, engaging with people's content even before you invite them to connect can help boost your acceptance rate when you do send invitations to people. So those are just a couple of things not to forget about.
Yeah, always, always, always do that. I don't care what people say. "Oh, I get more if I don't." It's like you're trying to start a relationship with just a handshake at that point, not a handshake and, "Hey, how you doing?" I mean, at least that, I mean, you have to add things there. So that's excellent, Stan. So when it comes to just the SSI overall, for me, it's actually not about being a scorecard or an index. It's really about showing me approximately where I'm doing well and doing, not so well with specifically my LinkedIn usage. In other words, I use it as a coach. And I think that that's what it's really about. It
Mm.
shows me where I'm doing well. I should continue to do well in those areas. Don't get me wrong. But it's also showing me like where I need to do better. And like I said, right now my engage with insights is way down. If that were a coach, they would be once upon a time would have been yelling at me. Nowadays, I think coaches just gently goad people, but still, it would be the coach telling me you need to do more engagement. You have to get out there and do this more. If not, you won't succeed. So that's how I view SSI. Stan, do you view it in a similar way or?
Very similar, very similar. Just and at a glance, you can tell where you need to focus just because of how the scores line up. So it's a nice little bar chart.
Yeah.
And as Bob said, you can say, oh, and for most of us, it is engage with insights. Now, whatever that
Yeah.
means.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Yeah, it just means that we're not taking more time to actually engage with insights, which I mean, and I know this, and yet I still fail at it. And that's because when you engage with insights on other people's posts, you are now reaching other people who you normally don't reach. So it's almost like you're talking in front of a new audience. So I think that that is a really good way to think of it. If you need motivation to do that, that should be a pretty big part of your motivation to get out there and do that.
yep, yep. Well said. Well
Yep.
said.
So one other quick thing that I want to bring up before we wrap it up, because my God, this is going long for us. Your brand, your kind of personal brand. We all talk about personal branding nowadays. It's like the in thing to talk about, but in my mind, it's the in thing to talk about because it's a good thing. You really should have your own personal brand out there. Your own personal brand will go way up as your SSI score increases as well. And this is huge because, as we've alluded to before, you want to be seen as the go-to person in your industry or vertical. You'll have people naturally gravitate towards you when you're seen as a thought leader. And that's one of the reasons why you want to engage with other people out there with through their own content. And I'm going to bring up a really good example here because it happened to me recently. If you're a speaker at a conference, you're up there, you're sharing your value, you're talking about, it, you're helping other people. Hopefully you're doing it in a very value added way. What happens afterwards? If you've done a good job, what happens afterwards? You get people coming up to you. They gravitate towards you. They view you as the go-to person in your industry or vertical. You're viewed as a thought leader. You need to do the same. You need to do the same type of thing, but on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn. Yep. Great analogy. It's always interesting how the physical world and the digital world,
Isn't it though?
they work the same way.
Isn't it though? And I think that that's one of the reasons why networking has taken, or virtual networking, I should say, has taken off so much is because it's not even a mirror because mirror sometimes implies opposites. It's more of a magnifying glass. I'm not sure. I'm not coming up with the analogy, but it's basically almost exactly the same,
Yeah.
except your audience is much more broad.
Yeah.
Your potential audience, absolutely, and the audience that's there. You just got to reach them. So I think with that, use the SSI as a coaching guide to improve where you're lacking on LinkedIn and not as a scorecard. That is probably the best out of everything that we've said. I think that that's the best piece of advice. What do you
Yeah.
agree with that? Yeah.
Totally agree.
All
Totally
right.
agree with that.
Sounds good. So we are going to wrap things up. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Making Sales Social Live. If you're with us live on LinkedIn or any other social network, we do this every week. So keep an eye out for our live sessions. If you're listening to us on our podcast, you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and hit that subscribe, follow, whatever that little thing is that you need to click to access all of our previous shows and be alerted when new ones drop. Socialsaleslink.com/podcast is the place that you want to go if you want to find out more information. We do 2 shows weekly, this one and our Making Sales Social interview series, where we talk with leaders and experts in sales, marketing, business, and many more areas that we truly hope are helpful to you in your busy days, weeks, months, and years. So, Stan, you're going to do it solo today. When you are out and about, make sure that your sales are
Or social.
exactly. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Don't miss an episode. Visit socialsaleslink.com/podcast. Leave a review down below. Tell us what you think, what you learned, and what you want to hear from us next. Register for free resources at linkedinlibrary.com. You can also listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Play. Visit our website, socialsaleslink.com, for more information.